It was December, about 15 years ago, when I suddenly got a phone call from Good Morning America, one of the largest morning talk shows here in the United States, and they wanted to book Deepak Chopra for an interview, which normally would have been amazing news, really fantastic. He wasn't yet a household name. The problem is that Deepak had just left a few days before to go on a safari to Africa with his family. And right before he left, he called and he said, "I'm going to be completely unreachable for the next 2 weeks." And this was way before email or cell phones, and it just wasn't going to be possible to call him. And the producer said to me, "I need to know in 24 hours if he can be on the show on January 2nd. And I was just going crazy thinking, you know, I can't commit him because I don't know his schedule, and I can't say no because it's such a great opportunity. So I just said, okay, I'll call you back in 15 minutes. And I closed my eyes, and inside of my mind, I screamed as loud as I could, "Deepak, call me!" And 10 seconds later, the phone rang, and it was Deepak. And he said, "What do you need?" And I said, "How did you know?" He said, "I knew. What do you need?" And I told him, and he said, "Of course I'll do the show, and January 2nd's perfect." I called the producer back, we booked it, and everything worked out.
Telepathy means instant communication between two people, regardless of distance, through means other than the five senses. The person who has done the most research on telepathy, thousands of experiments in the last 30 years, is the British biologist and philosopher Rupert Sheldrake.
And telepathy happens between people who are closely bonded emotionally, or between people and animals, if there's a close emotional bond. It doesn't typically happen between strangers. I've done a lot of experiments on telephone telepathy that show that people really can tell who's calling. In these experiments, the caller names 4 people they know well. They give us their phone numbers. We pick one of the 4 senders. The sender rings them up, the phone rings, and they have to guess before they answer the phone who's calling.
Maureen. Maureen. Yes! Oh, yes! Yes!
By chance, they'd be right one time in 4, at 25%. In our experiments, they're right about 45% of the time. And I now have an automated version of this experiment for emails on the internet and also for SMS messages. So it's now possible to do these experiments on a wide scale using modern technologies. Telepathy works between people who know each other well. The sense of being stared at often happens with strangers, and I think in nature it's probably evolved in connection with predator-prey relationships, that if prey animals could tell when predators were looking at them, they'd escape better than if they couldn't tell. And this sense of being stared at is common in animals, it's not just in people. It's a biological phenomenon.
Our conscious awareness is a very thin slice of what we're actually able to perceive. And there's a huge amount of additional perception going on below the surface. So another category of telepathy experiments is whether or not you can feel that someone is paying attention to you. So they're sometimes called remote staring experiments.
And when I think you're looking at me, look at the camera.
Right.
Okay.
Okay, so what I'm going to do now is make sure that we're picking up the physiology okay. We take 2 people and separate them, and instead of having one try to mentally send information to the other, you simply have them look at a closed-circuit video image of them and try to mentally or intend very intently to capture their attention, simply by looking at them. You're just waiting here for an image to come up, and as soon as it comes up, put every ounce of intention that you can have onto her. Look at the screen. Look at us. Okay, so there's the end of the 10 seconds. This is the moment when the TV screen turns on. And so she immediately stops relaxing, starts to become more aroused, and then near the end of it begins to relax again. So this suggests that this kind of response, skin conductance arousal and a restriction in blood flow during that period, if it happens often enough, on average, over the course of the session, then it gives us evidence that she was responding physiologically to our distant intention. So what this tells us is that these psychic connections are probably there all the time. Most of the time, they're operating at the level of the unconscious. And it's only fairly rare that it rises to the level of awareness and people can report it. On those occasions, when your senses are turned off or subdued, that's largely where people begin to report these other forms of connections. So meditation, dreaming, drumming, dancing, drugs, lots of things will deflect your ordinary attention and allow you to pay more attention to other things.
The official Oscar magnet. Well, Oscar has a very uncanny ability, and his uncanny ability is that he knows when terminal dementia patients are about to die. Generally, anywhere from 2 to 4 hours before a death, Oscar will wander into a room. He usually will leap onto the bed if he's allowed by the family and stay there. Usually he curls up next to the patient, and he almost serves as an early warning system, so to speak, for us. When we know Oscar is milling around a patient, we know that we need to ramp up our end-of-life services. We know that it might be time to call the family in from home, because he stays until the patient dies.
Many dogs, cats, and other animals pick up their owners' intentions. They seem to be telepathic with their owners. One of the ways in which dogs show this behavior is knowing when their owners are coming home. About 50% of dog owners have found that the dog goes and waits at a door or a window before the person gets home. We've done experiments that show it is really happening. We film the place where the dog waits. We have people go at least 5 miles away. We have them come home at random times. They travel by taxi to avoid familiar car sounds. And the dogs still know. They start waiting when the person decides to go home. So they're responding to the person's intention, and therefore it seems to be a telepathic phenomenon. It's what's going on in the person's mind, not noises or physical clues or anything like that, that's telling the dog when they're coming. I think social groups of animals have morphic fields, termite nests, ants' nests, bees' hives, and flocks of birds and schools of fish do as well. The whole group behaves as if they're a single organism. I think all social animals, including us, have fields for social groups that link the members together within the group and continue to connect them even when they're away from each other, physically separated. The closest physical analogy to telepathy is in quantum physics, quantum non-locality. Quantum non-locality is when two particles have been part of the same system. They're part of the same system, they move apart, and when they move apart, they remain linked to each other, or entangled, as quantum physicists say, so that a change in one instantly affects the other. My idea of morphic fields is very similar in spirit to quantum theory. The morphic fields are a bit like quantum fields. They're probability structures. Nature's organized by invisible fields. Living organisms are organized by invisible fields. This seems to be the nature of nature.
Telepathy suggests a form of connection between people. So if two people are really connected, And if you separate them and you poke one of them, the other one should flinch. And one of the more interesting studies of this type that I know of was done by colleagues at Bastyr University and the University of Washington. They selected one couple out of 30 couples, and then they put the person playing the role of the receiver in a functional MRI. This is a brain scanner that's looking at what's happening, the blood flow in your head. And they put the other person at a distance and exposed the sending person to flashing lights or to static lights. And the question was, if these two people are really connected mentally, then when one person is seeing flashing lights, maybe the brain of the other one will light up as well. So they did this experiment, and they found that the receiver's brain was lighting up, and it was lighting up in the visual cortex. This actually, it not only shows that telepathy is real under highly controlled conditions, it tells us a little bit about the nature of what that connection is. It would be very, very unlikely that it's a kind of signal connection, meaning like a radio sending a signal from one place to the other, because the usual form of signaling was excluded. So instead, if two brains are in a sense almost acting like one, it suggests that the connections we're talking about are a holistic connection. And I think that begins to point more towards a quantum connection rather than any form of classical connection.